Hey guys, this is Blake with the Three Hand Hunter channel, and I'm excited to show you all the Hamilton Khaki Field Automatic Chronograph. Now that's 5 words in the name. Can you believe that? But I'm excited to bring this to you because I think most people are used to seeing the Hamilton Khaki, just the Hamilton Khaki Automatic field watch. And this is the Chronograph one. So it's one you're not gonna see quite as often. Now, before I get into this, let me just mention, if you like seeing watches that you're not gonna see reviews on all the time, please subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate it. And if you like the content, please give me a thumbs up. That would be awesome. I really do appreciate that. Now, let's talk a little bit about this watch and why I think it's so special. This is powered by the Hamilton caliber H21, which is basically a Valjoux 7750 movement. Now, if you've ever had a Valjoux 7750, I've had several, and I'll tell you my experiences with them. One of my first luxury watches that I ever owned was a Breitling Crosswind, and that had the 7750. And what I learned after 15 years of ownership with that watch, it went with me everywhere, and I did everything with it, and it was extremely reliable. I had it serviced one time, not because it needed it, but because I felt like I should have it because I had it for so long. And it's one of those movements that can pretty much do anything, go anywhere, and that's what powers this watch. And that's one of the reasons why I purchased it, is because it has such a great movement. Now, what you're normally going to see with the chronograph movement that's a Valjoux 7750 is these two chronograph dials, but also a third dial over here, which is a second dial. Obviously, Hamilton removed that. And I love it because it gives this watch a lot more symmetry. Okay, that's the great thing about it. Now, what you're gonna notice, there isn't a second subdial. And so you might look at this watch and say, hey, it's not working. I don't even see anything moving. Well, it's powered behind it. And if you wanna actually see the seconds, all you have to do is actuate the chronograph, and you can actually have a hacking seconds hand as well. Now, that's not something that every Valjoux 7750 person is going to do. For those of us that have had them, it's not important. And I think it actually puts some wear and tear on the chronograph movement itself if you just run it all the time. Now, let me mention this. If you have owned the Valjoux 7750, or you know more about it than I'm saying, or if I say something incorrectly, please mention that in the comments. I don't ever proclaim to be a watch expert. I'm just an enthusiast, and I've owned a lot of 7750s. Matter of fact, this is my second Hamilton with the Valjoux 7750. I had the Hamilton X-Wind about 5 or 6 years ago. I liked it. It was a little too busy for me, but this watch is not that. This is actually the field watch. And but there's a lot of differences between this one and then the one that you would get that's not a chronograph. And so let me show you some of the differences really quick. Take a really good look at this dial and look at how beautiful the dial is, but more importantly, look at the sub dials and the radial pattern that you have around there. And then on the outer tracks where the indices are at, you'll see it as well. That radial pattern is so beautiful, and it's so beautiful to see in person. When you see the watch and you look at it and you're like, oh, that's a black face with silver subdials, it's a reverse panda, wish it had white subdials, but you know, it's a reverse panda. But you really don't get the full view until you see it shimmer in the light. And take a look at those indices. Those indices are applied. That's another big difference between this watch and just your regular Hamilton Khaki Field Automatic. This one has the applied numerals, and they're really beautiful. The minute track on the outside and the ticks and the hash marks You notice the second hand or the chronograph hand actually runs across just to the very edge of that of the dial, which is beautiful. And I'm going to go ahead and actuate the chronograph and get it running for you so you can see it. This watch is, let's talk the dimensions really quick. So this is a 42 millimeter case. Now, I know a lot of you will see this and go, wait a second, Blake, 42 millimeters, that's pretty big. And you can see it's about 42 point, from edge to edge, it's about 42 millimeters, right? And by the way, the lug to lug is, just so we're here doing it right now, is 51. And the thickness, like all Valjoux 7750s are rather thick. This one's close to 15 millimeters. It's like 14.7, 14.8, okay? 22 millimeter lug width. Now, as I was saying, a lot of people look at this watch and they say, oh, it's a 42 millimeter, it's gotta be big. You know why it wears smaller than a 42? Because what you're gonna notice is with a lot of these watches that don't have a bezel, you have a dive watch, it has a bezel. The dial is smaller, right, on a dive watch. Well, with the Hamilton Khaki Field Automatic chronograph, notice how the dial is still smaller. The bezel, although it's smooth, is still pretty thick, meaning it's pretty wide. So the diameter of the bezel is smaller, so it actually looks smaller on your wrist than a 42. I actually think it wears more like a 40 and a half. And I have a 7¼ inch wrist. I will put this on my wrist so you can see how it fits. But if you have like a 6¾ inch wrist, I think it would fit perfectly fine for you. Even with the 51 millimeter lug to lug. Now notice the bracelet and notice the female end links that are solid. This is, by the way, the bracelet itself. I believe this is a pin system. It was sized for me when I bought it. I did not buy this used, new. Let me get rid of my, hey, there's my field walkie-talkie. So I thought you guys might like to see that, and I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of it. So anyway, the bracelet itself though is extremely solid. It's got a beautiful bracelet, or clasp, excuse me. Nice milled clasp, double deployment, plenty of micro adjustments. The one thing that I wish it did, I wish it tapered a little bit more. You can see we have a 22 millimeter lug width, right? And then the taper is only down to 20. So it would have been really nice if this was a 22 millimeter to 18, but still the watch fits really well on the wrist, and I'll put it on my wrist here in just a second. Like I said, the middle links are polished, okay? But that matches the rest of the case because you have a polished bezel and beautiful brushing around the case. The case is actually done really nice. Signed crown, but look at the case back. Let me go ahead and get this zoomed in for you so you guys can see it. Beautiful perlage work on the movement. It is a Valjoux 7750, like I've mentioned multiple times. One of the things I love about this movement is that when you wear it on your wrist, and that rotor is extremely heavy. And so when you put one on these wrists and it shakes around, you could have your watch sitting on your wrist and you'll feel the watch actually vibrating on your wrist as the rotor is going around. They call it the Valjoux rotor wobble, and it feels like the watch is alive on your wrist. That's probably, in my opinion, one of the coolest features of having a Valjoux movement. You can feel it ticking, you can feel it breathing. It makes it amazing. Now, let's talk about some of the downsides of the Valjoux movement. The movement's thick. Therefore, any Valjoux 7750 watch you're gonna have is gonna have a thick case. You know, if you take a look at the Sins, I had the Sin 104, I believe. That between the exhibition case back and the front dial, the crystal, it was almost 16 millimeters. This is below 15. Now, if you look at the case itself, it seems thin. And that's another optical illusion that the Hamilton does with this particular watch. How they do that is protruding the case back out. So if you look at the top view when you're wearing the watch, it doesn't seem like it's so thick because the bottom of it is where the thickness is at. And that's why it wears so well. Unlike any other chronograph, Valjoux chronograph movement I've ever had, this watch actually fits, it feels snug to the wrist. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and take it off so you can see it on my wrist. Now, I am wearing a notice. This is an Avalon. I think I had this in my last video. I've actually really enjoyed this watch. I've been wearing it quite a bit because it's super thin. 43 millimeter, speaking of which, a little bit bigger, but here is the Hamilton Khaki Chronograph Automatic Field. Wait, did I say that correctly? 7¼ inch wrist. That's what it looks like on my wrist. And it fits really well. Look at how it looks thinness wise on my wrist. It doesn't look like a big fat Valjoux movement for those of you that have had them. It actually fits really, really well. And you can see it by some of the lume shots that I showed you. It's not a lot of lume, but it's a field watch. It's got 100 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal, beats at 28,800 beats per hour. It's a great workhorse movement and a great watch. You know, if you guys are looking for some sort of everyday chronograph, you know, automatic watch, something you can beat around in, this is a great watch to hunt for. They are not in production anymore. You can find them used, but I think they're great value for money. Hamiltons, generally speaking, give you such, and I'm speaking out of experience, out of the ones that I've owned, great value for money. A Swiss brand with American heritage. You know, I really do love and appreciate their watches. So guys, if you made it this far, let me introduce myself. My name is Blake. I'm a watchaholic. And if you made it this far, you probably are one too. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure you give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel down below so you don't miss any of my other content as I do reviews on different watches like that notice down there. You'll see that one soon. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you guys soon.